Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about 3 free agents that I want Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco to sign to the Silver and Black. As it stands right now, the Raiders are somewhere around $15.6 million in cap space after the 8 picks that they had in the draft. After signing Michael Gallup, they have 3 open roster spots, and they can get up to 91 players on their roster because of David Ogbah, the International Pathway Program player. The Raiders also get an additional $24.07 million after June 1st. Now, sure, we don't have this money yet, but I also want the Raiders to kind of think of the way that I think, maybe the way Chuck thinks, maybe the way you think, where it's like, I didn't get my bonus yet, or I didn't get my paycheck yet, but I know it's coming, and I'm willing to spend a little bit more money now because I know in a month that we're going to be ready to go. If the Raiders sign any of these 3 players, I am going live. So out of any of the 3 dudes that we're about to talk about today, if you see that name that shows up, Las Vegas Raiders have signed this guy, go get your drinking pants, go get ready to go, because Chugs and I are going to blow the roof off of this place. Hell, we were live yesterday breaking down the Raiders signing Michael Gallup, and then afterwards, we went live on our Celtics and Heat channel. We were partying with them over there. When breaking news happens, I want people to celebrate. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, let's talk about it, though, and that's what we did. And if that's the type of content you're looking for, here at the Raiders Report, we got you covered. So the way that this is going to go is I'm going to go from 1 in terms of the top priority free agent, and then the guy that's number 3 is the one that I'm not as concerned about. So usually when I do shows, I go 3 to 1. On this segment, I'm going based on my number 1 priority, and that's the guy I want to make sure I have enough money for. That's the guy that I want to make sure that I can figure out a way to get him rocking that shield, and he is Xavien Howard. He has worked with Patrick Graham. He has worked with Rob Leonard before. He has worked with Gerald Alexander. Gerald Alexander, when he was the Miami Dolphins defensive back coach. Howard in 2 seasons, he had 10 interceptions in 1 year, 5 interceptions the next season. I also think this is very, very important because a lot of times when we talk about Howard, people always bring up the injuries, and he has had multiple injuries. No doubt about that. However, I will also say that he's started at least 13 games the last 4 years. So he's been able to even get out there on the field. But what's really, really important is right before the 2024 NFL Draft, his agent put out a statement, which was also backed by a doctor, that said that Xavien Howard is 100% medically cleared to play right away and sign for any team. The fact that he has been medically cleared proves to me that he is healthy enough to be able to go out there and ball out. And I don't want people to think of Xavien Howard as the same name as a guy like Marcus Peters who totally flamed out. To me, I want you to think of a guy like Howard of really taking that ability of, we could find a legit cornerback 1 that could take our defense to the next level. Last season, had a 62% completion percentage against him, gave up 502 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 1 pick, 12 PBUs, and a quarterback rating against him of 86.7. Over the past 4 seasons, and the years that I was talking about Gerald Alexander being his DB coach, you can look, it's still pretty recent, back in 2021, back in 2020. And I understand that Howard probably isn't going to be the player that, you think of that legit number 1 corner on your defense. I'll also say this, though. I am old enough to remember when everyone was like, oh, Casey Hayward is washed. Guess what? Sometimes players play better in certain systems. And Casey Hayward was a Pro Bowl player. To me, I believe Xavien Howard, with our current coaching staff, with the fact that he has some of those ties where he's had a lot of success, that tells me that that could be a good recipe for success. And I'm willing to bet if the Raiders go out and sign Xavien Howard, and if he plays at least 15 games, he's going to be good enough with our current Raiders defense that he could have that Pro Bowl level of type of season. So my question to the nation out there is this, because when I'm signing a number 1 corner, and I thought about Stephon Gilmore, I did. I do think Gilmore would be more expensive than a guy like Xavien Howard. On top of the fit, I want to see what Howard looks like with our defense. But if the Raiders sign Howard, okay, do they have the best defense in the National Football League? This is going to be the pinned comment, and I want you to answer this honestly. Give me a yes, give me a no. Let me know what you guys are thinking down below. If the Raiders sign Xavien Howard, if the Raiders sign Stephon Gilmore, if the Raiders find a true number one corner, they will have the best defense in the National Football League. They were a top two defense over the back 9 games when Antonio Pierce took over last season, giving up on average somewhere around 18.3 points per game. With Christian Wilkins, with another year in Patrick Graham's system, with another year of Jack Jones, our top two safeties, you got a better linebacker room here, a little bit better. But if you're able to add somebody that has the swagger of Xavien Howard and he's healthy, that's what the best defense in the National Football League looks like. And I would love for it to be a part of the silver and black. Coming up here next on the show, I got two more players, okay? Two more players that I want AP and Telesco to go out and sign. And if you didn't see, we put out a show on Monday of players that I want the Raiders to sign. The name, Michael Gallup. An hour later, the Raiders ended up signing Michael Gallup. So Telesco, AP, if you guys are watching, you want to join, you just let me know. I also know that if you guys want to have a lot of fun with America's #1 fantasy sports app, PrizePicks is where the action is at. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and make sure that you use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and MLB entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy game plan, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. For me, I love watching the NBA. I love watching MLB. I shouldn't say I love watching MLB. I like watching MLB. I love it when I do have a few picks down with PrizePicks. But also, this is a football show, and I just have a lot more confidence in my ball knowledge on the NFL, giggity, than I do in baseball or in basketball or definitely hockey. So for my picks that I have, and if you want to roll with mine, I took Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Give me the more on that. Anything FKC. I'm going to go less there on Chris Jones with 11.75 sacks. So bottom line is this. Even though Raiders football is over, even though the NFL is not currently going on, you can still have a lot of fun by watching these events. And I'll also say this. If you need an excuse to watch the NBA playoffs, because I am in this boat right now, put down 10, 20 bucks and tell your significant other, your wife, maybe if you want to teach your son, your daughter, a little bit more about a sport, put down 10 bucks, have them interested in a certain player, and if they win, well, you get the money. Now, your significant other, it might be a little bit harder of a sell there, but I will say this. This has gotten Alex to watch NBA playoff games with me. Hockey, too. We watch the Vegas Knights and the Dallas Stars. If we don't play PrizePicks and if she doesn't have a chance to win, then I don't get a chance to watch the game. So, 2 birds, 1 stone. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring the Raiders Report. Let's go to the next player here. We're going to go again to another player that used to roll with Miami, Emmanuel Ogbah. And I recently did a show of my 53-man roster projection. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. But one of the things that I really noticed is I was like, yeah, we have depth at defensive end, but it's not really good depth. And I want the Raiders to be able to go out and add another edge rusher, another defensive end, because if, God forbid, if Malcolm Kuntz or something happens to Max Crosby, you're effed. Also, I like the connection. Ogbah worked with Rob Leonard in 2020 and 2021. In those 2 seasons were his only 2 seasons where he's ever had 9 or higher sacks, and he had 9 sacks in both of those years. And Rob Leonard was an outside linebacker, defensive line coach, so which is kind of what Ogbah played, stand-up outside linebacker, stand-up outside defensive end. He also has that connection with Christian Wilkins, Adam Butler, John Jenkins, so I like that. And he's had at least 5 sacks in 4 of his last 5 seasons. He did have an injury last year, which forced him only to play, I want to say, in 9 games. And even last year, played in 15 games, only had 1 sack. And I think because Ogbah's over age 30, I think you'd be able to get him at a reasonable price. Nothing crazy, but like something where you could at least still get him, be a solid player. And I'm going to give a shout out to somebody that, I was always a big fan of, Benson Mayowa. And when you remember when Max Crosby was a rookie, Benson Mayowa had 8 sacks that season. That's the role that I would want Ogbah to play. When it's 3rd down, get Ogbah in the game. When it's not 3rd down, get him out of the game. Because last season especially, he really showed you that he doesn't have that commitment to being able to slow down the run. And he's a cheaper version of somebody like a Unique Ngakoue, I think, at this point of his career. But again, like, you got Tyree, but what if Wilson wants to play on the interior at DT, where I think he's going to end up going? I've made it very clear. I would move on from Janarius Robinson. We don't need that type of shit on our team, and I hope that they do end up moving on from him. But if you don't end up moving on from Robinson, then you got even more unknown players that really don't have any playing experience. And outside of Max and outside of a little bit of time last season from Malcolm, if you're in the AFC West, if you're in the AFC in general, it can never hurt to have too many edge rushers, especially ones that have worked with your DC or worked with players that have worked with Patrick Graham. Graham was the Dolphins DC in 2019. That was the 1 year right before Ogbah ended up going there. So those two actually don't have any overlap. But in terms of Rob Leonard, plenty of overlap there, plenty of player overlap. Ogbah, third down guy, pin your ears back in after the quarterback. So give me a name. I've already given you two. Who is a player that the Raiders should sign? I want you to let me know down below. I put out a video earlier on Tuesday morning about my top 10 NFL free agents list. And spoiler alert, the player that you're about to see on this show was not on that show. Why did I say that? Well, I'll get into that in just a moment. But coming up here, the final player I'd sign. The original idea behind this video was Xavien Howard, Emmanuel Ogbah, and Michael Gallup. I thought about doing this show on Monday when I talked to Chugs, when we had like our whole meeting breakdown, and I go, I want to make a video like this. And he goes, all right, well, who would it be? Michael Gallup was one of those names. Now, since the Raiders actually signed Gallup, I had to find a little bit of a different name. I will admit, some other honorable mentions out there. Patrick Peterson, if you wanted to use him as a corner safety hybrid. If you miss on it, Xavien Howard, or if it's too expensive, call Stephon Gilmore. If Stephon Gilmore says no, then you call Steven Nelson. If Steven Nelson says no, then you pick up the phone and you call Dory Jackson. And then two other names that I'll at least throw out there. MBS, if you want to add a little bit more speed, somebody that has that connection with Luke Getsy. And then just, if you want the best tackle out there right now, I'd say it's Charles Leno Jr. However, if I'm the Raiders, I'm going to look at adding another offensive tackle just in case, and just being able to add an extra offensive lineman that gives you a little bit of that flexibility, because right now the Raiders line, it's a very, very young offensive line. So do I want to add somebody that can play both tackle position, has also played a little bit of guard, and that I can get at a cheap price? I'm going to go with Cameron Fleming here for offensive tackle. And some of you are like, well, Mitch, we have Thayer Munford. Mitch, we drafted Delmar Glaze. You are completely 100% right. But when you look, and we'll show you here the Raiders' offensive line in just a second, I think you're going to be like, yeah, maybe adding somebody that has a little bit of a veteran presence to be a backup isn't a bad idea. But if I could find a cheap veteran offensive tackle who can legitimately play left tackle and can legitimately play right tackle, I'm on board for that. 3 years of AFC West experience, 62 starts under his belt. Like, if God forbid, if something happened to Thayer Munford, are we confident in Delmar Glaze's ability to be able to go out there right away and be your starting right tackle? I don't know if that's the case. I also don't even know if I'm 100% confident in Thayer Munford's ability to be able to go out there and play right tackle right away. And because you have so many young players, does it make sense to just add somebody who's a little bit older, and then that way you could end up just keeping that older veteran guy that can play multiple positions, and then you let a young rookie like Glaze or like Thayer Munford just learn one position, and Cam can just be that backup? When you look at some of his stats, though, last season, 3 pressures allowed, 1 penalty against him. I want you to, though, predominantly look at 2022 and 2020. This is when he had more playing time, obviously, out there. Then when you look at his PFF grades, last season, only a 59.4. 2022 had a 72.6 overall grade. 2021, a 71.7. Also, you're talking about a team that's got new head coaches, new offensive lines, new quarterbacks, a lot of changing up here. If I'm the Raiders, I pick up the phone, I give Cam Fleming a call, and I say, Cam, you're going to be a backup swing tackle for us that then allows your young guys, Munford, Glaze, to concentrate on one position, that also allows then Whitehair, who I think is probably going to be your other backup center guard that you end up keeping. You keep Whitehair, you keep Fleming, you keep Glaze, you keep Munford, and now you have a little bit more depth at your offensive line, because outside of the 5 names that are pictured there and outside of maybe one Delmar Glaze, there is not a single other player listed that I have at least somewhat confidence in. And if the Raiders don't have an offensive line with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, nothing else matters. So one more time here, I got 3 free agents that I'm going to target. And again, the way that I did this show is based on the $18.6 million, now technically the $15.6 after Gallup. And we will get some of that $24.1 million after the Raiders cut Jimmy Garoppolo. We just technically don't have it yet. I would anticipate that Howard's going to get a deal somewhere around $8 to $10 million a year. I would say Emmanuel Ogbah is probably going to get something around $6 to $8 million per year, and then Cam Fleming's probably going to be somewhere around $3 to $4 million a year. None of these are back-breaking contracts, but 3 deals right now that you'd be able to lock in. We'd have a full roster and would be really solid. So what I want you to do is grade the signings, A, B, C, D, or F. Like, I want the Raiders to go out and get aggressive. I want the Raiders to get a corner. I want the Raiders to get an edge. These are by far my 2 biggest priorities. Like, I could have just thrown in here Stephon Gilmore on top of that, but you're not going to get both Howard and Gilmore. I see a few people saying that. Let me know A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know what you think of my signings for the Raiders after the draft are.